Welcome to the first episode of our brand new series, The Think Tank, presented by Modern Football Technology. The Think Tank is where top minds in football coaching come together to tackle some of the game's biggest challenges and explore innovative strategies. In each episode, we'll dive deep into key topics like offensive and defensive structure, player development, game day adjustments, trending concepts and schemes, and more. All with insights you can apply directly to your offense, defense, or special teams. Each week, you'll hear from 3 different coaches, bringing their unique perspectives, experiences, and game-changing approaches. Whether you're a seasoned coach or just starting your journey, the Think Tank will challenge your thinking and help you take your coaching to the next level. Get ready to elevate your coaching and see the game in a whole new way. Here's the first episode of The Think Tank, presented by Modern Football Technology.
I like having answers in the terms of both man and zone, 1 high, 2 high, but also having multiple quick breakers.
If we see something on film or we see a new combination or motion, it's like if we don't have the ability to a term for that or a structure for that, that's the things we work on in the off season.
Bill Walsh, The Score Takes Care of Itself. I mean, you guys, that book is incredible, but he says, teaching to find your leadership in that.
We're here for our first Think Tank presented by Modern Football Technology. This is something I've been planning, looking forward to, and I'm really excited about the first 3 coaches I've pulled together here for this. The 3 guys who, over the years, I've talked a lot of ball with, done a lot of things with these guys on the content side too. Josh and Dub obviously host a series for us, so we're going to have to get Dan involved in that too. But we're really excited. We're going to talk about creating the structure of your offense today with in mind keeping the idea that we want to build something that is very easy for our players to learn, but yet at the same time, we don't oversimplify it, that we don't have the flexibility and the tools we need as offensive coordinators. So real quick, I'll introduce each guest here. I think you know all of them, but Dub Maddox, who longtime Tulsa, Oklahoma high school coach, 6-time state champion, does an excellent job with his R4 system. Josh Herring, quarterback coach at Lassiter High School, just a great football mind. He hosts the passing lab for us. And Josh, I met Josh years ago actually through our other guest, Dan Gonzalez. Dan, longtime football coach, does some consulting now, working with coaches around the country. And I think all 3 of these guys just think about the game in a very detailed way. And I'm excited to get things going with these guys. So I'm going to kick it over to them. This has been designed to be really a show without a host. I'm going to let them control the conversation here and take it where it may go. And again, in general, the topic is creating the structure of offense. And I know we have a lot of good questions from these guys that are going to get going here. And I think I'll let Josh lead it off with one of his questions and we'll roll from there.
This episode of The Think Tank is brought to you by our partner, Modern Football Technology. Trusted by elite programs like Sarah High School, Union High School, St. John Bosco, and Bishop Gorman, Modern Football Technology gives you real-time insights on opponent tendencies and self-scouting, saving you 8 to 10 hours of film breakdown every week. With air-free analytics and instant data integration, you'll gain a play-calling edge all game long. Visit teammofo.com to schedule your demo today and see how Modern Football Technology delivers real-time tendencies and real-time results.
So we got a lot of things we want to talk about, I'm sure, and it's probably going to go all over the place. But like one of the first things kind of I want to look at, like, so when you get Dub, you've been at your place for a while. Dan, you at different places you've coached, you've been there and you have staff continuity and those guys kind of get on the same page. When you have a new guy come on staff, so you guys have a pretty defined structure and teaching method and everything. Like, what's your process for, say, a new guy's a new running back coach, new wide receiver coach, whatever, and you got to get him on the same page with you so he speaks the same language? Like, what's the, I guess, methodology or like tactics or techniques that you use to try and get that guy up to speed?
Yeah, I think I'll go ahead and jump in first and then kick it off to Dan. But for me, this is something I haven't done a good enough job in the past. And what I started doing a couple years ago was started to create basically install teaching modules and basically using NFL film, college film, and then after being at one place long enough and doing this a while and building the system over the years, you have a pretty good database of teach tape. And so I think it's important to compile that, organize it, and not handing over a playbook per se, but downloading those modules, 5-10 minute lessons into Huddle and being able to share that out with coaches and even players has been huge for me. I think I got one a couple years ago from Andrew Coverdale, and he was sharing some stuff with me. And I said, man, this is a great idea. And it was a game changer for us. The staff just loves it. We can share it with our freshman guys and give them kind of a watered down version. I think another thing that we did that was really good, going through just a bunch of defensive playbooks. Alabama somewhere has it circulating. They have basically a freshman playbook. And Josh, you're shaking your head. I think you've probably seen that, right? And going through that, it's something they give to their freshmen. It's just kind of their basic terminology and just foundational front coverage rules for things. And I was like, man, this is really good. And so we kind of created a manual like that for our incoming freshmen. And just with our base terminology and just basic football concepts that they need to know. And that's been really two things that have really simple, but have helped us accelerate just that learning curve.
Yeah, we did the freshman packet thing too. Man, it's amazing. And you can hand that to a new coach and say, listen, like, dude, I'm not trying to insult you. We're not like, but this is, you can't coach here if you don't know this basic stuff. This is what the rising eighth graders learn. And it's great. I mean, it's a great conversation starter for both those. And we got it from the same place. It was Alabama. And I think we saw it in a Georgia one or something maybe as well. And we were like, all right, we're going to try that. It was really good.
I agree. That's kind of the basis of a couple of the high schools that I've been at, helping and creating installs for freshmen through Huddle and things like that. And then even with players, having installs recorded. So some of my clients now, they have a folder with all of our install videos for 5 or 6 years worth. And without having them broken out lets you pick the ones that here are the base ones, and you can just click them and create a playlist for them. I agree. That's an invaluable tool.
So, like, one thing, Dub, you have a question. It was one of the first questions that we talked about, but about issues you see with passing game. I'll let you ask the question, but I thought, what a phenomenal question. If you want,
for the guys that are listening in, we were kind of firing off questions today to each other in our group chat, and one of the things I wanted to talk to these guys about and pick their brain on, and Josh and Dan, we're in the off season, and kind of as football junkies, we're kind of researching our favorite teams and teams we want to study. And I tell you, just for me, when I sit and watch this, or you watch these bowl games, some of the things that just stick out to me is some of the issues that I think I see, and I'm just curious to see what you guys see as just red flags of bad passing scheme design. And then what are some things that you guys are seeing as you watch these films? And obviously we study the good ones. I think it's important for coaches to identify what are some of the things that we may need to be aware of that we're not, that are in scheme design, focused more on passing game for this talk, but just that maybe stand out as being not too quarterback friendly or just structurally just not sound. Is there anything that stands out that are patterns that you guys see in some of these offenses that maybe could be helped out by using a better format?
Dan, I'll let you start. I'll let you go.
Okay, sure. So I've had the luxury of having the whole year to just watch and collect things, and it's really interesting that was your question that you sent to us, Dub. There's a couple things. The first thing is unrecognizable protection plan versus blitz. A lot of people want to spread things out, and you can tell that people are not necessarily on the same page in either declaring a protection or the protection rules, because there'll be an empty with no quick breakers. I've seen things like that. There'll be people who are of the Art Briles vertical choice read and empty. There's nobody side adjusting for him or giving him a hot. That's one thing. In some pro style things, some people that claim to be pro style, one of the things that I see is a propensity for going quick game and then deep, but nothing intermediate unless it's it's a true passing down, and now I'm forced to throw for a certain depth. So those are the two main things that I see that make up for. There's the best times for me to hit a speed cut dig is on first down or second down and 7 or less, when you can get a predictable defense. Some of these people hold these plays and are an RPO team or a play action team until it turns into a passing down situation. And that's where they decide, oh, now we got to throw a 15-yard dig route because it's third and 13 and they're facing Tampa or whatever. And it's just a hard thing to begin with.
Yeah,
I'm go ahead, Josh. I'm just piggyback. I mean, I think this is an epidemic, Dan. Just the lack of understanding of just protection issues and not giving quarterbacks hot answers like within their schemes. I mean, I'm watching SEC film and golly, the defensive ends these guys got to go up against every week, and they're trying to max protect with 7 and they can't do it. And they're all running deep routes. There's no check downs, and then if they empty it out, there's no quick hot answers. And or they're leaving. I'm going to riff on this one for a minute, but I mean, how many times do you watch 6-man protection, check release protection, or just they're keeping the back end, and you're just wasting them? Most guys are reading off that guy, and if he stays in, you're going to add that backer to the blitz, or he's just sitting there counting his change, not helping out at all on the protection. And let's get the best athlete on the field out in space and at least control like a backer so we can hit that dig or have a hot. I mean, it blows my mind how just bad some of these, I don't know, these schemes are to me. And am I the only one seeing this?
Not at all. Not at all. Sounds like it.
No, I mean, the pressure outlets not having answers or pressure. And I'm even willing to say, okay, maybe they had this zone pattern and they got man and he was supposed to can it or something and he didn't, but it happens so much. And the thing for me that it's third down and there's so many times I'm seeing routes. I know that it's a bash fest, I know, but I'm seeing routes that are half field routes. No routes are crossing the center line. The quarterback has no runaway route. So I remember I was blessed. We were talking Alabama earlier. I got to go when they were in their absolute prime, when people didn't even really have a clue, all this match coverage stuff, right? To go watch them practice. And they had their scout cards and they're drawing up routes and they're practicing against these half-field concepts where nobody crosses the center line and no one is open. I'm talking about it's skelly and you're seeing these guys not throw a completion for 7 or 8 passes. And I'm like, if you don't get guys on the move and give the quarterback a chance, then to have some type of outlet that's breaking into his vision or something, it's going to be bad. So, I mean, defenses, you got to give them credit on some of the stuff they're doing pressure-wise. I think it's not the coverages. It's like you're talking about, Dub, with add-on blitzes, breaking down protections. That's the stuff that bothers me right now. It's not we talked about 3 high safety stuff and what are we going to do and the new fads for 3 or 4 years, but these new blitz patterns and sims and creepers and all the other fancy talk, some of it's good stuff. It's tough. It's stuff we as offensive coaches have to deal with.
Yeah, I'm seeing the same thing I was watching film today, some SEC teams. I'm not going to mention names, but they're an empty, kind of a bunchish empty and red zone concepts, and they're running basically smash into the boundary. Quarterbacks dropping back, looking at that, and they're running snag to the field with the 3 other guys in bunch. And the snag concept's already – so he's looking for the smash. Their triangle coverage, they've got it capped out. And then he resets back to snag, and all the routes have developed, and he gets stuck and just gets hammered for a 5-yard loss it's a 4-man rush. And it's like, what are we doing here? I mean, do we understand how vision and route breaks all time up? And we got to help these guys out better from our scheme structure, in my opinion.
What do you guys so from our perspective, if it's us and we're seeing this stuff, obviously we're talking where do we go as offensive coaches protection answer wise, to deal with this stuff? I know, I had a college coach tell me, and I'm going to give him a lot of credit since we're bashing on college coaches. 3 years ago, he was like, Josh, look, 7-man protection, check release, 5-man protection with giving the quarterback answers. I'm done with 6-man protection. That's what he said. And obviously he's not done. They still have 6-man protection. They still work it. But that concept of we got to do something different besides just get our back eaten up by pressure every single time. I think that's something at all levels you're seeing and having to deal with. So what do you guys think answer-wise are some of the things we should be looking at?
Dan, why don't you jump on that first?
The first thing is, if I'm going to be in some kind of, I think that people try to have the perfect play call. And what I see is just kind of like the example that I see a lot watching tape where everything is open at the same time. So you have the three receiver stick with the slot fade. The number three guys running the stick, number one's running the hitch. And on the backside, they run some kind of option route with number two and either a protection release fade or whatever. Really, you're trying to get the isolation, but I don't know that they are really. They're trying to coach looks so that here you got the fade versus man, you got this, but are they really giving a defined, okay, on this down, you're going to read the mic. Here's your thing. But like you're saying, there are no answers in the terms of both man and zone, one high, two high, but also having multiple quick breakers. Because if they know, from what I'm seeing, if they know what your hot is or what your hot adjustment is, and you don't have like two guys or maybe even three quick breakers in an empty set that he can deal the ball to, I think people play into people's hands. And the whole, I think that I saw, and my biggest frustration was a team that I watch a lot of doing the whole check with me thing, lining up, getting it, and then they look back and then they are almost always wrong. They're either burning a timeout because they can't decide what to do, or the look that they got is never going to be the one that they, after you make the check, the defense makes the check, and then the play clock's down and you got to live with a bad play. So having answers along the timeline, just what Dub always talks about, Josh, you and I talk about it all the time, having an early, a regular, and a late to have a, for lack of a better term right now, having those kinds of answers along with your protections. We have a lot of, Josh, you've seen my stuff. We have a lot of protections where maybe it's the same protection, but the back is aligned opposite on purpose and he's checking across. We have protections where we can go from a regular half man, half slide to making a core call where now it's the four down and the mic belonging to the line. And then the back now has the two outside backers in a 4-3, right? Or so that you're checking both outside backers for them to bring four to a side, just in a generic zone blitz. They bring four to a side and a four down, trying to make it to where people can kind of keep up without having a drawing, but you're picked up. Having those abilities along with having the quick breakers so that if you do get caught, you at least have, my guy doesn't have to throw this versus a blitz kind of thing.
I think, to me, at least keeps them on their toes where they can't just design a blitz package to just attack the same thing all game long, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I think we're seeing a ton of tight end empty with that yo guy, and then sometimes you're keeping them in, sometimes you're getting them out, sometimes you're chipping. I think that's something that's another good tool to have in the arsenal to help mitigate some of those issues.
Are those some of the, Dub, you had asked earlier about defensive trends like in your area, and that is the stuff that bothers me. I think we're kind of covering that, but like, are you guys seeing new things that are bothering you? We're giving the defensive guys all the ammunition I guess they need, but
yeah,
what are the things that are bothering you? Like, what keeps you up at night right now?
A really good rush in bothers me. So no, just kidding. But I think Josh and Dan, you're seeing just really good stuff at the high school level now across the board, just because the information's so accessible these days, and defenses have always kind of been behind, but you're just seeing a lot of good stuff. I mean, the static coverage is a freaking dinosaur. I mean, you don't see static coverage anymore, right? I mean, those are the days of old. So everything is post-snap movement, multiple coverages. The good teams are going to have, more than one empty check. You're going to see three safety some games. You're going to see just a wide array of different structures, and they're just much more sound. For me, just obviously Sims creepers, I think probably getting better up to speed on just how to handle that. A few years ago, that was a little bit challenging for us, but I think we're seeing more three safety stuff. And if you want to throw it, they're dropping 8, it just makes it kind of tough. So you got to commit to the run game there, and play action and boots and movement stuff is good for that. But we see some wild stuff with it. You see kind of psycho fronts or standing up those 7 or 8 guys and moving around, and Jolie Dunn trees type stuff, like the 3-3 stack. That's kind of coming back a little bit. I don't know if you guys see any of that.
A little bit. I think you think it's personnel that now as teams don't have as many D linemen, they've got all these hybrid linebacker safety type dudes, and I think so that's why odd front it's the personnel that a lot of teams have. I think
it's for us. I mean, Josh, where you're playing, I think every team you play has all the freaks, off the edge. So you're probably going to see more standard 4-man front, right?
Well, there's a lot more of it than there was even 5 years ago. I mean, the defensive revolutions go faster now, where they're all even all of a sudden, and now they're all odd again. But I will say there's a lot more multiple front scheme, whether you're odd personnel or even, than there's ever been before. It used to be defined there and even front. So we see a lot of odd front where they're sliding guys into an even front type deal. So you're seeing a lot of that stuff for sure.
That, and then we don't see static fronts very much anymore either. I mean, it's a lot of line movements, a lot of twists, slants, just a lot more movement, and then just different front structures, and keeps you on your toes, man. I mean, you got to be really schooled up. You got to make sure your concepts can handle all the issues, and we do a lot more checks and check with me's and having certain run checks, but it makes it fun for me. I mean, love the challenge.
Yeah, I shouldn't say this to give defensive guys tips again, but like the twist and how good it is now, like guys used to twist and run stunts. Now they're coached in how to eat up an offensive lineman so another guy can come off his tail. And how can I take two? Just like we talk about taking two with a safety and a corner on a route, like they're taking two offensive linemen with these different games they're running stuff. I think that's been a big change. That's really hard on offensive lines, even pretty experienced ones. It's kind of you got to get the ball out because they're going to get home if it takes enough time, I think.
Yeah, without a doubt. I think the other question that I really want to always pick your brain, we're here in the off season, like typically every year, Josh and Dan, I think as you're studying film and Dan, you're consulting with your clients, we always kind of fall into experimenting things during the season, or maybe you lose a kid, or maybe a kid is better at something and hey, let's try this, or whatever the case, but you kind of fall in, you still, you know what, this is a really good idea, and it maybe lead to some innovative things or some new things. Is there anything that you maybe fell into this year or some of your clients are doing, Dan, that kind of piqued your interest and you're exploring more, or anything you're kind of chewing on right now in the off season to maybe expand further?
Yeah. So one thing that comes about, I was talking to a coach maybe about a month ago now, but full tempos and getting motion. You triggered something in my brain. They lost a kid that was like a Division I guy, and then so then he's got a couple of really good high school football players, but not the home run threat, that the GoDaddy that they lost. And so they kind of fell into having to motion to create leverage on everything, dig routes. They couldn't throw double slant without getting into a stack, or because the people they were playing were pretty good. And then it became a thing of creating multiple tempos. Obviously, people go real fast. One thing that they felt was that if you put the communication burden back on the defense, because a long time ago, you drew something up against the eye, and then you covered all the motion rules, or at least the defense did, right? Then it was 2x2, when you were one back going from doubles to trips. But people rarely motion a guy all the way across the ball anymore, and they certainly don't do it twice. Motion a guy set up in some really good college teams, and obviously in the NFL they do, and you see the problems with creating gap soundness, and then running simple things like outside zone helps with it. But those kinds of things, falling into different motion schemes and then combining them with double movements, but being able to do them, giving it a one-word name, for example, like an enormously long play call, even in a short, they just call it Echo or Echo 2 or whatever. And then they have no problems getting the play in. And then they've got multiple movement packages along with creating leverages. I think those are things that can help you. Defensive guys are always going to be like, if you can run the ball for 5 yards or 6 yards a carry on them, and you'll start seeing more predictable things. It's an all out passing down when they know they can stand people around and move them around, that they're able to do that. But those are two things, the tempo and the movements, to create all the leverages that the main things I've been looking at.
Josh, what about you?
Well, so like one of the things, so this is, I can't clinic on this because I don't know the answer. I'm working on it. Like one of the things I'm interested in, you guys know how prevalent now in the NFL, and it's really grown into college, like exit motions and these fast motions that are 100 miles an hour at the snap. And, like 2 years ago, Andrew Coverdale was like, hey, this is going to be the next thing. So I'm looking at that, and you're seeing sometimes people will bust and you get easy stuff, and it's really about getting releases. But I'm looking at, okay, how can you make sure that you're getting what the defense is giving you, what they're giving you when you're in this motion? Like, is there a way to read it? Like, how can you incorporate giving the receiver the choice to do something depending on the defensive reaction? So, and there's some stuff I've looked at and some things I've talked to guys about, but I think right now it's kind of all on the quarterback of, hey, we're motioning this guy. You just got to process it and read it out. But is there a way you could help him and define it and make it simpler? I think is something. And then I'm looking at, and this is something that you guys are really good at, both of you, but with outlet structures, like all three of us have always had different things to have defined. This is how we get to the backside. This is how we create a high-low, that sort of thing. But what are outlet structures with all the things we've been talking about where we pretty much have, let's say, 3 guys in the outlet structure built in where we're going to get something we know is always there against man, and the quarterback has the answer. And we've got things that are going to flood zones. So what kind of got me into the non-traditional one was, you guys, I know you've seen this, but a lot of the NFL teams are going, they're in 4x1 stuff. And you'll see there's an over route, there's somebody on a shallow, and then there's a back to the 3-man side where you're basically getting 4 strong, okay? And they can chip. They'll have 2 tight ends. They do all the different stuff. So I'll watch the Rams and some other teams do that. And then they always have the over. They've got a drag. They've always got a back to the flat to the field side. So they're getting 4 strong, but then they're manipulating and running whatever they want with the other 2 guys. So it's like, can you build that kind of thing in with more than one route structure where the quarterback, I've got the outlet structure built. Now, to beat coverage, I can call whatever I want with those other 2 guys and play games. I hope this makes sense since we're not on the board.
No, it makes sense because this is the rabbit hole I went down this season. And so it's crazy it's funny how we all kind of fall into the same things. But for me, some of the things that we did was, if I think I'm following you, Josh, so it's like, let's say you're 3x1 and it could be a yo tight end guy, whatever. So you have a concept and let's say it's blade. All right. So if we say blade, they know that the tight end's on the shallow, the single side X is on the dig, and then your tailback's on a wheel in the boundary, right? That's the locked outlet structure. And then now your 2 receivers to the field, it's whatever concept you want. Now, obviously we want it to be some sort of rhythmic base concept that we can hit on the last step. Right. And so now we can call blade and we can one word it. So it's blade. Everybody knows the outlet structure is locked in. And then now I can signal, or I can give the quarterback, hey, this week it's these 2 things, or maybe it's this 3, or maybe if I don't trust my guy, I'm going to control it. But we signal out to those 2 guys, hey, is it seam fin? Is it motion in short and run quick smash? Is it slant flat? And so you can rhythm that side or even delete it altogether, and you can go right to your outlet structure, your high-low with a tailback on a wheel. And so that was something that was really, and now you can do the same thing with like a 4 strong, and maybe if it's knife, the back's going to be off, he's going to the field on the swing, and you still have your shallow dig as your outlet, and you can generate kind of a quasi. I mean, there's a million ways you can do it, but I think the whole concept of what we're talking about here is, how can I lock in a portion of the field as an outlet structure? What we started doing, we had the opposite. So maybe let's just say we're 3x1. Well, in this concept, whatever you want to call it, let's say it's clippers. It's going to be standard 3x1, and we're going to have our X receiver on a pivot and our tailback on a wheel in the boundary, and that's our blitz control, right? That's our blitz control, our rhythm. We're going to look at that if we get kind of pressure in the boundary, or we're getting kind of any type of cross pop or double back or blitz or whatever, and then our 3-man combo is going to be whatever we signal. And that 3-man combo is going to time up where we can essentially rhythm that boundary blitz control side, and I can reset and still be in sequence with my field side. Or you may be able to delete that pre-snap. Like if you're not getting blitz or pressure, maybe they're 2 capped out and the wheel's pushed out and they're 3/2 because you got a really good X. you can just delete that and you can go right to your field concept. So I think that's kind of what you're talking about, Josh's things. That was some really good stuff, and we can talk more in depth later on some of it. I can give you some film or what, but that was really helpful for our quarterback, and it kind of gave us that adaptability and versatility that you want, but it just really made the quarterback feel confident. If we're playing a really heavy pressure team, I can say, hey, we're getting pressure, you're going here. And then if we're getting zone, here's our best zone combo because they have 3 different zone checks and trips. Well, here's our 3 maybe combinations we want to run that we want to signal out there away from your blitz control side. So,
Coach, it's time for a quick break and a word from our presenting partner, Modern Football Technology. I think one thing all of you who have a deep interest in the passing game will want to hear about is Modern Football Technology's QB grading module. It was developed with input from the Miami Dolphins and coaches like A.J. Smith, offensive coordinator of the USFL's San Antonio Brahmas, and ensures you can make informed decisions and accelerate player development. As Coach Smith puts it, execution wins games, not rosters. With the right tools, you can turn potential into production. By combining data-driven insights with hands-on coaching, Modern Football Technology helps you build quarterbacks who don't just understand the game, they elevate it. Visit teammofo.com to learn more and give your program the winning edge it deserves.
Yeah, that's really good. I mean, Dan, that's one of the things you taught me a long time ago is don't just have a way to tag up your single guy and have him isolated where he can get doubled capped. Well, let's get that guy in the slot. And he's number 2 to the field. And now we have all these options with him. And now with all the split field stuff, now he's on a nickel and you're getting clean releases because of the other stuff. So it's building in those structures. That's really good stuff so that you can isolate those guys that you want or get the route that you want.
Dan, I wanted to ask you, you just released, I'm going to do a little plug here for you. You released some courses, I believe. And was the courses on 4 vertical only or the one I saw on 4 verts?
No, it's 3 of them now. I did a 2-part course on verticals. It's not 4 verts, but
Right.
it is the vertical read stuff. And then I did one on floods, and then I just launched one, I think this weekend, on quick rhythm passing.
Can you give us maybe one of the best things out of that could kind of wet our whistle for everybody that maybe want to look at some of that stuff?
So the biggest thing was in each one of them, trying to create a structure to where you can teach something across the board. And so talking about outlet structures, we have things that I got to tagging basically however many ways you can run a combination of some kind of magnet or grab route and then wrap a speed dig around it, right? Kind of like what you're talking about. So we do have that for what was being described out of trips with the third receiver coming underneath and being the shallow over underneath the dig, that would be bevel, right? To create, but we have different kinds of option routes with different landmarks underneath it, and we can dictate who we read is something. So, for example, if we're reading the outside backer or nickel, we just call that option. The O and the N, you're optioning off of that guy. If you're doing it off the mic, it's called an Omaha. It's an option off the mic, right? So different combinations, like bore is just a basic and an option route. Boom is a basic and an Omaha, right? So that we can dictate in a structure. But the thing is creating it to where some of the things that we talked about, or some of the things that I've come to, is the best explosives happen when they are unplanned. And the easiest way to describe it is almost, this is not like what you guys call, it's not sloppy where you got the slant option. It's to hold a guy, basically running a stop route at a certain landmark with respect to the outside or inside backer. And then something that I found you could do even with really young kids is look at the quarterback's eyes. You're running a stop route, you're ready to accept the ball. If the backer comes, you could get it right now. If he drops and opens up and leaves you alone, you could get it right now. But your trigger move doesn't start till the quarterback comes to the guy over the top of you. So if the quarterback, as he's turning his eyes, from one side now to the dig route, my trigger move, which is usually outside, right, doesn't start until I feel him coming down to me. And then, so like trail routes from the outside in, Omaha, Oscar reads the corner. It's the same thing. It's the same principle. So think about everybody's option way to run smash, right? You got a flag route, and then you've got somebody stacked underneath him. That's an Oscar. He's reading the corner. And if the corner bails, then he runs the out route. If he squats on him, if he starts to drive on him or is outside of him, then he turns and stops. So it's the opposite. But basically having a way of tagging that and then teaching it to where you could, obviously in your protection system, depending on who you can get underneath the dig route that week or that season, you want to have multiplicity. And that's kind of the thing that I've seen. It's best if you could teach things at a young age to people and then grow up into it, because you never know when your running back is going to be a slot when they get to varsity and they'll never be a running back again, or outside receiver to inside receiver. And if they've never done it growing up in your system, then it's wasted reps. And so you're having to catch up. But if they've always learned how to run an option route kind of thing. And so that's what the building structures like that, to where certain things get taught to every position. Well, not every position group, but certainly outside or inside receiver. And certainly running backs can do those same things as well.
Josh, I had a question for you. Is on your offense, do you move your guys around, or are they kind of locked in like air raid type? Is your X always X? Is he ever a fast three? I mean, do you ever put him in a fast three and empty your trips, or vice versa?
It varies from season to season, but yeah, they start out from a core of like the Z's on the right and the X is on the left, but they move. So like, especially because we do a lot of 3x1 nub. So when they flip, I mean, they're going to have to move anyway, and we can move who's 1, who's 2, who's 3. But so it sort of starts from the air raid. This is your side. But where I kind of got away from that, the air raid model years ago, is it became so we could cross train just because of the kids we had. Like X and Z, it's the same position. So that changed a long time ago. But yeah, we can move them around.
Do you guys ever find, like for me every year, I feel like it's week 6 or 7 or maybe even 8, and you start to realize some of the things your kids really do well or have a knack of, but you're finding out, in my opinion, like too late. You know, like for example, that tight end's just really good at running that option route, or he has a good feel for it, or whatever the case may be, or this running back runs a really good double move route. And what I was thinking about trying to do that I haven't done is I want, in the off season, is there a way in spring or summer is to kind of take guys through a combine or something and just have some different things that you're doing when you're in your routes, and just see what guys can do and put them in different positions. And can I put my running back as a fast 3 and running a juke route or whatever? But how many times, am I the only one that you fall into week 6 or 7, you find out this kid makes an unbelievable play and like, man, I should have done this 5 weeks ago.
No, I think it's absolutely one of those things. And to me, it starts with, if a guy is special with the ball in their hands. I was very lucky. My son, I had a team that I coached in youth football. My son was the quarterback, and the running back he starts for Arizona State at defensive back. So yeah, we found out pretty early that him moving him around, and he was one of the real reasons why it was really good to have a route tree back then in that system. But to your point, juke routes and quick outs are what we basically learned to do with him, and like beating people to the flat. And if people ever played a too high shell on us, he was going to be the third guy inside running seam route. I mean, basically he was going to outrun the mic, right? But anyway, that kind of thing I think it's, as soon as you find someone that's pretty good with the ball or has any kind of skill, I think there's a lot of merit to that, Dub. I mean, putting them through some kind of circuit is an excellent idea to me. Like they used to have county fair or whatever, where, maybe you have stations of routes, like in a really big camp, but it's just with your kids. And you like maybe film them and evaluate them. Who runs the best juke route? It might be a tight end and someone you never thought of, I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, without a doubt. I kick myself every year. And we had a tight end a few years ago, and it didn't matter. I mean, we started putting him in the backfield, just handing it off to him, and he just had a knack for getting 6-7 yards. I mean, they just bounce off, and he wasn't a D1 kid, but it was just, I wish I would have figured that out 7 weeks ago.
Well, that kind of stuff helps you find, like, they can do stuff with the ball, but they are not a traditional X receiver, and they're never going to be. And if you've got them, like, our job as coaches is to put these kids in the best position to succeed and find the spot where they need to be. And you find guys where that's a jet sweep guy. He can do that. No, he's never going to run a great dig route. It's going to be terrible, and he's not going to take coaching well on some other thing that you want to put him in a box and do. But can you find stuff for those tweener guys? I think it's a big deal. We had a guy we found to just teaching him a route tree was not going to happen. But if you could put him in the backfield and motion him out, like motion him outside of kind of a reduced split number one, you could throw that kid a fast screen. If the linebacker went with him, you could throw him a go ball, and you could do stuff with him and hand him the ball off. And if he could do those three things, you have a package for him, and it doesn't have to disrupt your base offense. I mean, you know what I mean? Where, like, now you're getting a kid that needs touches without you getting pissed off because he won't fit in your box, but you also don't screw up the rest of the offense just to get that kid touches.
When you do your end of the season breakdown, do you find yourself, like for me, every last couple end of season breakdown, you're like your most efficient pass play, whatever it is, and you ran it like 13 times all year or 15 times? How do you keep yourself confined of not, stretching out too far? I think one of our questions we were talking about is how do you know how much you want to add, and how do you keep the guardrails on from not getting off the road and making sure the kids can execute what you're doing? Do you have any kind of metrics or anything you're looking at there to stay in the lanes and not venture off too much?
Dan, I'll let you go first on this one.
One of the big things I did over the last year was look at that. And for a passing team, I think it's really hard to have more than 4 core runs and probably 10 passes. I'm talking passes, period. Like, so if you're going to run drive out of 10 and 11, that's 2, right? So I kind of built our install grid. I think I might have showed you when we talked. I took a picture of it, Dub, this summer, of like asking you about numbers, and that's what I was kind of working on with that. Basically, to answer your question, I think that people, myself included, was the biggest is people installing too much. Now, ideas can be the same because I think especially if you're new at a place or you get new players, you got to put in what you can put in to see what you can do. But the real challenge is getting down to a number that you can practice. If you can't practice things left and right, I mean, when I was in college, I remember we'd have 65 passes in the game plan. And I remember going like a minute at a time. I mean, we didn't practice everything is what I'm saying. And then stuff would get called. One time we lost to our rival on 4th down. We called a play that had never been run in pads before. That kind of thing. And so I think that however it gets structured, something has to come out. And and even the smallest details, you got to be able to kind of work backwards from how much time are you going to give yourselves in group and team to really work a surface of something and then work backwards from there. But like looking at those, you made me think about it a long time ago, Dub, and you did too, Josh, of just about how many times are you really down in the red zone? How many times are you really in 3rd and 3? And people carry way too many 3rd and 3s instead of carrying over maybe a formation tweak or maybe a shift to disguise something, because you're really not going to need. In nowadays, if you go to overtime, you're going to need a bunch of 2-point plays. So you might need some tight red zone stuff. But like, I think that those kinds of, that's what I've been working on a lot. And it's coming down with that finite number. But for sure in the run and the answers, and a lot of guys won't like this, if you're going to have a run and then 2 answers for it, and you're going to have 4 of those, that's 12 spots. Your play action pass or your naked off of it or your screen might be one of those answers. And you might have to just say, if you're really going to stick true to repping things over and over again, or like you guys were smartly saying about your blade combination, you keep these guys they're static, however you dress it up, and you're running your 2 or 3 manipulative things. I mean, that's the key, I think, to being able to do things well.
Yeah, I think this is like a 4-hour discussion. I mean, this is what coaching is, right? Is us talking about this. But like for me, you were talking about guardrails. One of the lucky things about me kind of coming up when I first started coaching an air raid system, and we don't use the numbers. We don't do 90, 91, 92, but I still think that way in that mode a little bit where I'm like 90s were shallows. Well, that's like drives or whatever. So for me, may not even tell the other coaches, but like for me, I'm mapping things out. I've got this concept list of where we're at is like, okay, when we get out of the bounds of where we were air raid concept wise, we do a lot of stuff that's not air raid or whatever, but like it keeps me sort of within that defined box. But I will say, like, you have to have answers for the people on your schedule for what you know they're going to do front and coverage wise. I just think I can't believe the amount of guys that I talk to, and they'll ask me that question about how much do I need, and I'm like, well, what different coverages do you see in your region, or what are the fronts? Okay, well, what are you going to do against that? And it's like you got to have answers for the stuff on your schedule, and your football ecosystem really matters. Like in Georgia, like if you're going to be a 6A, 7A program and win championships, if you look at the pattern over the last few years, if you're going to be one of those teams competing for championships, you're going to have some semblance of balance. You know what I'm saying? Like somebody somewhere can stop the run, and somebody somewhere has got a pass rusher you can't block. So you got to kind of be able to do that. But you can get at the lower levels and you can live in extremes, you know, and like your program may not be in a position where you're not competing for state championships. And in order to give your kids a chance, you may have to be a little more extreme run pass or what you're doing. You know, I think for me, and you guys attack this and tear it up, I've always just felt like if you're really good or you're really bad, you can be really, really simple. It's kind of the middle where everybody's fighting for every advantage that they can get. You've got to kind of figure out, okay, how can I push the envelope and do the Einstein thing of like be as simple as you can without being too simple or whatever that quote is. I mean, I think there's something to that.
No, that's a really good quote that I haven't thought of in that manner before, but it's so true. I think one of the things that I battle with is trying to do too much and then you lose your identity. And we were playing a game in the office the other day, and I think about the Bobby Peters books. All his books, they have like that core play that they were known for that year on the front page, right? And I'm thinking, like, if I go back to the best offensive years that we've had, like, there's going to be one play in that year that, I mean, that was our best play, and all of our counters worked off that, and that was the one that put fear in the defensive coordinator's heart the most. That's the struggle for me is you lose that sometimes. And so I think just kind of, you know, my inner self-reflection from this last season is I want to make sure that at the end of the season I have what's the one – I mean, because like we played a game, right? New England Patriots, what do you think? You're like, well, it's Hoss wide juke, right? I mean, it's like – and so we would call out the best offenses, right? And one coach would just nail it. Miami Dolphins, well, it's the RPO vert switch, right? And so every great offense has that one play that someone in our staff room could just nail out as their identity. And I thought that was a pretty good reminder for us that we were just kind of working through.
Like, I think you guys, like when I think of you guys have core identities, you have a system, and it can carry over from year to year. Like, and it's defined and it's got answers, but like, how do you, with the stuff we're talking about, how do you continue to innovate and try and have an edge without losing your identity? Like, how do you maintain as much as you can? This is who we are from year to year, but we also have to sprinkle in and not just be offense of the week. I think guys listening out there, it would stun all of us if we knew how many people change their offense every single year. I mean, like, that is a common thing. So, like, how do you stay who you are, but still you're looking for the thing that's going to help your kids be successful the next year?
It's a challenge in high school because your personnel changes so much year to year. I mean, in my opinion, it's some years we're going to be more 12 personnel based because we got two really good tight ends. That's rare, but that's my preference to have athletic tight ends that we can flex out. And in other years, you may have a quarterback that can only do so much. So I think in high school, you really got to be able – your playbook is big, have a big library to choose from, but you know how to really ID. And that's why kind of going back to what we talked about earlier of, okay, who do we got? What can they do? who do we have to beat? Who's the top 3 teams in our district or region that we have to beat? What do they run? Okay, what concepts do we need? And I mean, Dan can jump on that, but lesson I learned a few years ago, and I heard a really wise coach, I can't remember, is at a clinic, say this, but he was like, every year is different. He goes, like, for example, last year, jet sweep was our thing. I mean, it's jet sweep and everything works off that. And then what I learned was, well, the next year it might be just throwing the quick out to my fast guy to the field. I mean, so I think ideaing kind of that as fast as you can and having enough scheme knowledge and experience to build everything else around it. And I think that's what Dan has with his system, and he's way better with his terms and how his word association than I am. But that's what we've tried to do with ours over the years, is just you have enough inventory and know how to protect everything. It's just really kind of deciding, okay, well, what do you have and what can you do? And then how do you protect it?
Yeah, Dan, for those of you guys that are not familiar with Dan's system, I think I've always felt like I'm pretty good at acronyms. Dan might be the greatest acronym creator in the United States of America. Not just football, he is the greatest there's ever been at creating acronyms.
Dan could give ChatGPT a run for their money.
He could, no doubt.
That's Paris High School, Paris, Texas. That's who I attribute it to, Miss Pope in freshman English. I think that the challenge for me is, okay, not driving myself crazy, being able to structure everything, which is why I've had to tear things down twice and reboot terminology, which is something I've always been hyper sensitive to the running back knowing what to do in the passing game, because they've got a lot to handle protection wise. Obviously in the running game and growing up, that's not going to be a thing of priority. Probably is putting a route tree in for the running back. But the challenge is being able to name everything that you see, because it drives me nuts not to have a structure for it to where, okay, just like as Dub would put, this is where your rhythm starts. Like, I have to be able to tell the quarterback on any play, this is what your thought process is going to be. And then, but the whole thing, like I was saying just a little bit ago, is if I had to distill this and I was going to take 10 passes with 3 more that maybe are banked plays, so maybe I've practiced them all year and I'm pretty good, I've carried them through game plans. They're basic things that we can run without much of anything. So basically 13 total plays, what would they be? Because the challenge for me is I'm much better at deciding here's the top 4 runs than I am saying pick the top 10 pass plays.
Same.
Mm-hmm.
And the challenge is that's the challenge for me, is making myself, if you could only do this. And the only thing I can come up with is, if you watch people over weeks, then maybe the thing that you like, you can set up. It's an iteration, 2 or 3 weeks down the road. Maybe you can put it in or get it in, get close to it. But I think that's the biggest thing. But having a structure for everything that's like my pet peeve.
I think Dan has an advantage, Josh, because he's not caught up in the high school hamster wheel that we're in. And so it's like we've got a window of 4 months, right, to look at what we want to add or change, or do we need terminology tweaks, and then we're right back in the rat race. And he's had to, like you said, to do 2 total reboots. And Dan and I were talking this summer. I was like, dude, I'm so jealous. He was showing me all his word association, everything matches up. And I was like, man, I'd really like to have just a few more months than 4 or 5 to kind of reboot everything, because I think it's critical to have that time.
Yeah,
it is. The last 2 years of my son's career, when I was just watching him, that was when I kind of could step away from everything and just take notes down. It was like 2 years of notes. And then you finally say, okay, I can put it all together.
But I think you're both hitting on it. The language is that, you can adapt from year to year with the kids and the talents that you have without having to do something crazy if your system has the language to be able to do that. The toolbox that you just talked about, I think that's so important. You can't run that stuff in a year, but to have the ability to adapt and say, this is what we're going to do. We've done this before. It doesn't freak people out if you have to game plan. Like, that is helpful from year to year, so you don't have to reteach your kids all the terminology.
And I think it's important, and one of the things I recommend coaches do as you go through your years of coaching is, if we see something on film or we see a new combination or motion, it's like, if we don't have the ability to a term for that or a structure for that, that's the things we work on in the off season. So it's like, I may never run triple option, probably never run triple option, but I never say never, but never. But anyway, if we ran it, we do have a term for it, and it has some sort of word association. I think that's important, and it's kind of a fun exercise, but you may lose your quarterback and have to move your running back to quarterback, and you may have to run triple option someday, and you're going to call it whatever you want to call it. But I think that's critical, because when you get in the season and that happens, or you see that cool scheme or play, and I mean, you're sleep deprived, you're stressed out, and you have 30 minutes to figure out what you're going to call it, and it has no connection to everything else that should be paired with. That's the thing that frustrates me, because it causes confusion for the kids. Well, coach, the theme for all these quick games was NBA teams, and now you're calling this whatever because you ran out of NBA teams or whatever the case. And they're just, I've seen that hurt the kids' ability to retain the meanings within that in a game.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I also think, Dub, I've learned a lot from you about talking about common language. You'd be happy to know I was in some pretty high-level business meetings in my day job today, and common language is a theme. I mean, across companies that are trying to make literally billion-dollar companies are trying to find a way to communicate common language from the CEO down to the desk level. And it's a very real thing. And if you're able to attain it, it gives you infinite power over those that don't. I mean, it was like, this is a conversation that I had at about 4:00 Eastern time today. And I was like, man, I've heard that before. So those are things from your books and your work. Those are things that always, they pop up, and they're real.
Yeah, one of the things that I think was a good exercise that we kind of delved into last year, and I think we all kind of naturally do it, but just kind of putting pen to paper and creating a glossary of terms for me and my quarterback to explain a lot with the little. It's called brevity codes. So that's what the military uses. So one simple word that has a lot of rabbit fur on them in context for what picture or pattern you're seeing. And it's really critical in the post-snap sub-second world of quarterback decision-making. And so we kind of just, would take like, okay, here's a Sam, nickel, or apex linebacker, whatever you want to call him, right? Okay, if I say buzz, he's buzzing. What does that mean? Man, that's a fast movement on the snap to the flat. He is not pattern matching. He is just straight. And so we developed kind of a language. Hey, did he trigger? Yeah, what does that mean? Well, that means he fast reaction to a bubble, whatever the case. I mean, and so creating kind of a one-word like language for different reactions of defenders was helpful for us. And so I think that's something that I think we all kind of do. We kind of come up with words just on the fly, but had kind of sitting down and creating a glossary of terms for those movements was kind of helpful for us for fast in-game decisions or understanding what the countermeasure should be within the route or the concept.
Yeah, that's really good. I mean, like Bill Walsh, the score takes care of itself. I mean, you guys, that book is incredible, but he says teaching to find your leadership in that. And like the school I'm at right now is a 4.0 gets you 250th in your senior class. All right. You're like, okay, this school was not that type of school. That's all I'm gonna say. Okay. And these kids are understanding scheme by doing that kind of stuff. And I was like, dude, that's incredible. I'm going to steal that everywhere I go. But like, do you have teaching strategies like Dub? I thought that was awesome. Just having that language, but things that are making guys that you can be sure they understand. Like,
yeah, man, I'm big at, I used to be big classroom, film room, but just with the TikTok mentality, these kids, we got to get out in the field or get in a room and we got to have them stand up. I'm big on walkthroughs. Josh, in the podcast that you and I are doing, it seems that's like the common thing I'm hearing with NFL guys is just how important those walkthroughs are. And so what we started doing a few years ago is we would go out in the field and we would do what we call mini fields. So I would take the field and basically put cones down the middle, right? and create like two, in their minds, this is two full fields. And so if we're on, let's say with the first offense would be on the left hash. Okay. If we're on the left hash, okay, in the mini field, you're actually on the right hash. And the numbers on a high school field would be the left hash. Okay. So I don't know if it's hard to visualize this, maybe just talking through it, but the left sideline is the sideline. The numbers would be the left hash. Between the numbers and the left hash is the middle of the field. And then the left hash is actually the right hash. And then the cone splitting the field down the middle would be the right sideline. Okay. So I don't know if you can picture that, right? And so then you have another field with the same. So because in this mini field concept, I needed those landmarks based on splits and just having them understand where the field is, the boundary is. I needed those landmarks to kind of still hold true. And so it allowed us to get our first huddle, our second huddle, and even a JV huddle down the other end. And we could just take one, the running backs coach would take the JV huddle. I would take the first huddle, receiver coach take the second huddle. And hey, here's our opening script for the week, right? Or here's our third downs. Here's our whatever it is. And we can go through before practice and just call the play. And they're condensed because the biggest deal for me is like when we're trying to do walkthroughs and it's the full field, you're having to yell and everybody's spaced out, and it didn't feel like I had their attention as much. But when I reduced it to that mini field, the offensive line coach was right there with the line, and he could quiz them. Okay, hey, what are you doing here? This is an under front, over front. What, take through your steps? And the quarterback, you do not use a ball. Like if you put a ball, the kids are going to start running full speed. They're going to throw it and they drop it. It's like you take the ball out and you're just jogging through your steps. So the receivers are counting their steps or they're getting their yard depth. All right, coming back, act like they catch it. Quarterback's going through his progression. Everybody's getting coached, and we were able to get through that script, opening script or that third down script in 5 minutes. And we can be hash specific. Here's our middle field plays. Here's our right hash, whatever. And maybe a one-word period, all right? We're going to do one words. I just want to see if you know it, right? We're going to quiz you, all right? Hey, Lakers, 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 all right? Everybody gets lined up. And it was cool to see you have these 3 pods or 4. If you're a bigger school, you may be able to get 4. You have a freshman team down there. But everybody's running through those scripts and you're getting that walkthrough done. And then when you get to that period, man, it's like they learn it much faster. That was one of the best things that we've done. And I got some film. I may send it to you on Huddle, but it was a really great way for our kids to just get that stuff down and get them out of the classroom and just make sure they understand on the move. Well, I think this is a good stopping point, Keith.
I mean, we could go all night, but
this was awesome, man.
You guys did an incredible job in tying it up here. You guys really got into the learning part of this, and that we can sit on the board, and I've done it with you guys. I mean, draw all kinds of things up, but it always comes down to, can we teach it? How well can we teach it? What are the methods we have for teaching it? You guys shared just a lot of incredible ideas here. And just sitting back and listening to this and hearing how everything was going with this. I mean, it's like I envisioned this. So I'm glad this worked out here on our first one. I think, again, to me, just a great group of guys to start with. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you guys and everything you've helped me with over the years. I've learned a lot from you in the times we've talked ball and implemented a lot of different things that you guys have done. And, I just can't say enough about how well you guys think about the game and how important it is to share some things like this. So thank you to all of you. And I'm looking forward to the things you're doing with us as well here moving forward.
Yeah, man, it was pleasure, fellas, honor. And you guys are studs. I appreciate you guys just talking.
Appreciate y'all.
Yeah,
thank you.
Awesome stuff.
Yeah.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of The Think Tank on the Coach and Coordinator Network, presented by our partners, Modern Football Technology. Real-time tendencies, real-time results. Visit teammofo.com to learn more about how their cutting-edge tools can elevate your coaching. And don't forget to check out the incredible resources from today's guests. Explore Dan Gonzalez's and Josh Herring's materials on CoachTube.com. And be sure to check out Dub Maddox's game-changing insights at r4football.com. You'll find the links to all of these resources in the show notes. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time.